Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. My name is Antonio Dixon, and with me I have Christian from ERP Advisors. ERP Advisors have been a partner with us for the past few years in helping their clients with the testing pain points when it comes onto finance and operation, but just Dynamics in general. And in today's webinar, the topic of conversation, we are going to talk about upgrading with confidence using test automation to keep up with Dynamics 365. So in terms of the format of today's session and the agenda, we're going to do a brief introduction in terms of what are some of the pain points or challenges that we see with the one version updates coming from Microsoft. Of course, if you're on this call, you might be very well familiar with that. And then afterwards, we're going to go into a Q&A, just like a conversation between me and Christian, just to go some of the common questions or just topics surrounding with testing. And then afterwards, we're going to do just a short demo on how we at X Plus are addressing some of those pain points and challenges in the market when it comes on to testing. So I will put it over to Christian. You can now go and start.
Right. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, depending from where you're joining us. As Antonio mentioned, I'm Christian Galonska Fernandez. I work at ERP Advisors, and there I am leading the managed service line of business. If you scan the QR code, which you'll see next to my face, you'll have all my details from a professional standpoint. But I thought it might be nice, just because we're just getting to know each other also here on the webinar, to just share privately. I love going diving, as you can see on the right-hand side. That was me last year going diving. I like hiking and exploring new cities. And I do like playing darts, even though I constantly lose at it. So that's just a little bit about myself. And I'm curious to get to know you guys soon too.
Well, great to meet you, Christian. All right. So a bit about myself. Well, I'm not a fan of diving, but I do love hiking as well. Just similar to Christian, I really like to go out to the nature and hikes or rock climbing when I do have the time. As it relates to the professional space, so I work in X Plus as a GTM strategy specialist. We're working closely with partners in terms of building some vision here when it comes on to go-to-market strategy, and just thinking about how we can connect in terms of bringing more to the market, hearing the concerns and the problems that the market is facing, and how we can address those concerns to make sure that those pain points are being solved, and what type of content that will be engaging enough, like the session today, that will drive the awareness in terms of testing and just in general in terms of what we do. So nice to meet you as well, and I do hope that this session will be very informative, but also I hope that it will be engaging for everyone who is registered. All right, back to you, Kristen.
Right, so I'm just setting a bit the scene. As I mentioned, I'm looking after managed services, and one part of that is obviously the upgrades. And I thought it was quite interesting to just share how our clients, or what the land looked like for our clients in the last 4 months. So if you look at the time scale, in January, our clients were busy with project operations update. In February, they were busy with project operation update. March, they were busy in April. Now, the challenge with project operation updates are they're mandatory, so you can't skip them. Whilst in finance and operations, you can. So you can see I dotted them in orange, that between January and February there was one finance upgrade, and between March and April. Now, even though you can skip finance and operations at least once, the project operations were constantly there. So if you look at it, you have one, two, three, four, five upgrades or updates in a span of 4 months, which was quite time consuming and nerve-wracking, if not the right things were in place, right? So, and I think you guys that joined the webinar, you probably have similar pain points. So if we look at the next slide, if we think about the challenges that normally come with this, is you first need to understand the release notes. Then you need to understand the impacts, like which areas are impacted by the release. Then you start building the test suite and assign the individual members to actually test it, and then you execute the test. Now, this is all happy path. Worst case scenario, a bug gets introduced, so then you need to start thinking about how to resolve the bug, get it all prepared, go through the pipelines, and then ultimately you basically end up by preparing the next update because as you see on the previous slide and this slide, the time frames are extremely short by Microsoft these days, especially if you use project operations. So that's a bit what we're trying to do in this webinar to just help understand how can we be more efficient, effective, how can we help you guys to have a smoother upgrades.
Wonderful share, Christian. So I'm gonna stop sharing going into the questions, but you said something very important as well. Like the time frame that Microsoft give is pretty short, and I also can understand sometimes it's really difficult to put some planning in place to make sure that, based on the amount of updates that you need to test, especially the ones that are critical, and that's why it's important to have some test strategies, some, strategic approach to it, because you can't just ignore it. It's always going to be there, and they're always going to come at a very fast pace. So it's best to get ahead of it. Okay, so let's go into the first question for you, Christian, today. So when you first engage with a new client in D365, where do they typically sit on the spectrum? And I'm talking about from reactive to proactive. What does that actually looks like in practice for you?
Right. So honestly, the majority are reactive, and that's not
Mhm.
just because this is
Yeah.
the first question. So I come in swinging, and say everything is bad. This is all reactive. It's not a criticism either. It's just a reality, right?
Yeah.
Because typically the platforms have evolved faster than the governance frameworks around it. And what we constantly see when we engage with new clients is that organizations don't lack the awareness of that risk, right? But what they lack is the infrastructure to act on it consistently because there's no owner for update readiness defined. There are no agreed list of critical processes, and there's no repeatable way to validate them. And that makes them all basically from the beginning a bit quite reactive. The good thing is though that we can help. We both can help on this by structuring the governance before we start thinking how to execute the test. But to answer your question, I would say typically reactive.
Yeah, it's a similar experience for projects that worked on where they're on a reactive stage, where they're experiencing some challenges and they want to fix those issues. And you would like to think that most companies would definitely want to be more on a proactive approach. But in terms of how we like to work with clients is after we're finished with the project, now they move on with a proactive mindset, right? Putting things in place so that there's no misstep, there's no surprise in this sense. So really, really great point there. And now this goes into my second question. So what does the lack of control usually cost organizations, beyond the technical fixes?
Right. I think the most obvious and visible cost is that one people always talk about, right? It's the hours spent on manual testing, and that's the occasional incident that requires remediation, right? So like I said, there's a happy pass, you test, everything is good, but then there's also the pass you test and not everything is good. And
Mhm.
this is a very obvious one, and I think a lot of people talk about this. But in our experience, when we dig a bit deeper and talk to our clients about this, we actually found out that there are three costs which are much bigger than let's say, the obvious ones, right?
Mhm.
One of them is every update cycle requires the same senior people, right? So they get pulled away from their strategic work to do repetitive
Mhm.
validation. And now, given the amount of updates that are coming, that's a lot of weeks of high value time spent on activities that they should probably
Mhm.
not spend their time on. So that's a massive cost to the organizations. The
Yeah, in terms
second,
of
yep, go ahead, sorry.
yeah, in terms of the opportunity cost, right? Because they're taking away from their usual responsibilities, having to focus on lesser stuff. You can call it the boring task in the sense of that.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
and so that normally comes, with the cost, right?
Mhm.
The second one that we see is the decision-making confidence, because it is great to work with the products of Microsoft, to evolve the roadmaps. It's
Mhm.
it's really cool. But the problem is if people are not too confident about the updates in general, they would be also reluctant to enable new features because normally with updates, not every feature is automatically enabled, right? You need to choose to enable that.
Hmm.
Um, so the features don't get adopted, and that can be a cost to the organization because you don't really evolve your system further. You're just firefighting what you currently have.
Hmm.
And and I think the third one is credibility. Um, it's something that nobody puts on an Excel file when they think about cost per se. But if you think about a finance director needing to explain to his CFO why the system is acting up and but the finance is typically accountable for and numbers don't add up, that's a conversation you really don't want to have. And
For
that's
sure.
one of a heavy cost. It's a credibility cost ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, if your company is doing millions of dollars in revenue and probably billions of dollars in some instances, just a day of downtime can be a huge loss. And I wouldn't want to be on the side of that call to
Mhm.
explain why did we just lose millions of dollars, you know? So it does, that's a big picture, and there's a lot of stake at stake. So it's a lot more expensive to be proactive than be reactive.
Ex-
Um, yeah,
Exactly.
to be reactive than proactive. Yeah.
And
So let's
that
go
ties
in
us
on.
back
Mhm.
to decision-making confidence, right? That's when
Yeah.
people say, like, hang on, do we really want this feature now? Like last time it didn't really go so well. Let's maybe not do this.
That's true. That's true. Okay, going into the third question. So when you dig into why organizations end up, reactive, is it usually a technology problem, a process problem, or an ownership problem?
It's all, but
Hmm.
we'll do it one by one because it's basically a problem of all three, but we'll digest it one by one.
Hmm.
So in our experience, the very first reason for it is the ownership problem, right?
Hmm.
Because as I mentioned earlier, normally organizations don't have a clear defined answer to the question, who is accountable for the health of this platform across update cycles? And I'll tell you why. Because IT will tell you, well, we're responsible for the infrastructure. The business will
Yeah.
say, well, we're responsible for the processes. And support will say, well, we're responsible for incident management ultimately.
Hmm.
So nobody owns the ongoing governance on how the platform gets updated and evolved, which means the updates that arrive, the accountability is a questionable, and everything needs to get improvised. And again, we're talking about very, very short time spans.
Hmm.
So that's the number one thing why organizations or our clients used to be reactive because it's basically redoing it over and over again, figuring out what do we do this time, basically, right?
Hmm.
The second one is processes. Usually, once you do have the ownership, you have a clear accountability. What's then missing is the process in terms of are they documented? Like, is the critical process, are they documented?
Hmm.
Are there agreed acceptance criteria? That's a pretty important one to know, like, what does good look actually?
Hmm.
And what's the structured approach to validation? Because the people that do that's in their hands, but it's not in a repeatable framework. Again, you're pulling them away from their day-to-day jobs. And then third, it's the technology, but that's actually the easiest part to solve because putting a tooling in will accelerate your problems or it will accelerate your repeatability. So as we all know in IT, there's a good saying, if you put something bad in, you'll get something bad out. I think the saying goes slightly different, but let's not do that today. But
Yeah.
that's why technology is the last of the problem. So once you've
Hmm.
got the ownership, you've got the processes, then you can deploy technology on it, and then you can accelerate. But if you don't have ownership and the processes agreed, then the tooling is not going to help you either.
Yeah, you know what? There's a saying, if you plan to fail, you fail to plan, right? So it's really important to have some strategy. So going to the fourth question, in your opinion, what does it take to shift an organization from reactive to proactive, and what usually gets in the way of that?
Right. So I think what needs to happen, and it needs to happen in the right order. So everybody will. See, I'm basically always on the same themes. It sounds very repetitive. It sounds a bit like a broken record, but I do hope it will help you guys understand to go through uh, optimization of testing. So the first thing again is somebody needs to own it. And it cannot be a
Yeah.
steering committee or design authority or a different community that people make up. It can't be a shared responsibility either. It needs to be a named individual or team that is accountable for the update readiness. Because
Yeah.
without that, everything else is just voluntarily and inconsistent. Okay. So number one is always who owns it. Now,
Mm-hmm.
once the owner is identified, he or she needs to help identify what ready actually means for the organization, right? So which processes are critical? What does passing look like? Now, again, this sounds super obvious, but it's not. Apparently, it's not. We work with the clients day to day, and it's something that we constantly need to do. But what we did realize is if you take the time to sit down and actually write these things down, that act on itself helps clarifying a lot of things because
Yeah.
suddenly you'll start thinking about, well, this is a passing criteria. This one, yes. This is the threshold where we would say this is a risk that we can accept. This is a risk we cannot accept. So just clarifying that and writing it down goes a long way. And
Yeah.
then the third thing that needs to happen is when the structured automation will become relevant, and that's where your partnership, your and my partnership comes in because you'll have the foundations, you've got the ownership, you've got the processes, you know
Mm-hmm.
what you'll do, and then you can start thinking about test automation tools, and that's where I think you and I become quite relevant jointly.
Mm-hmm.
What comes in the way, and that's probably not surprising to anybody, is time and urgency. Time because the updates are coming every month, like I showed you when it comes to project operations. So
Mm-hmm.
finding the right time for people to have the headspace to say, okay, we need to do something different next time is incredibly difficult
Mm-hmm.
because you're basically just running really quickly from update to update to update to update. And that's normally what
Yeah.
gets in the way because we'll talk to them or to our clients and say, we need to do this and this. But they're like, yes, yes, we understand that. But right now we have this problem. And actually, in 2 weeks' time, the new version is coming for Project Ops, which we also want to have a look at. And I think that's what comes in the way.
Yeah.
The organizations that break that pattern down and will accept that nothing is perfect at the beginning, they'll get the momentum and they have the momentum at the moment. And things are starting to show like this, it's getting smoother and smoother every single month.
Mm-hmm. Magnificent, magnificent. And that's one of the beauty about what we do and how we work with partners at Xplus because for our clients, it's not just a transactional relationship, but we really care about their project and we want to know, where the challenge is, how we can help them. And it's not just, providing, let's say, a SaaS application, but we actually walk through with them, like kind of holding their hands and how we can solve these issues. And after the project is finished, when they're done, have a solid plan in place or strategy so that they can now, as we say, move over to that proactive mindset, that threshold, because from their interaction with us at X Plus and also interaction with our partners, they have a full-on strategy and how to address these challenges going forward. So, great point. Going to my fifth question. So Kristen, what's the inflection point, the moment or event that shifts a client mindset from we manage with manual testing to, okay, we need a fundamental different approach. Manual testing no longer works.
So, in my experience or in our
Mm-hmm.
experience, there are two types of inflection points.
Mm-hmm.
And they're quite different in character. The first one is also, I'll start with the obvious one, is an incident, right? So something broke after an update. The business impact is very visible and it creates an urgency at leadership level, right? Because like, hang on, this is not good. That kind of moment is painful, but it generates a very clear momentum because the incident was big enough that it became very visible to the business, so people will ask questions. How can this happen? How can this be improved? Similar is like, my team also does just normal incident resolutions when there's a P1. There's always a root cause analysis done afterwards. So that helps. In quotation helps, right? It's a clear momentum. Everybody has an understanding. Things need to get better.
Yeah.
The
That
second, and that's an obvious one. It's painful for the client, for sure, but it helps. Now, the second one, and I think that's a bit the challenging one, and my advice is always trying to figure out where we're on that trajectory to that intersected. And it's if it's granularly coming in, right? So things are working well enough that there's no clear momentum like the first time when you had a big incident, right?
Mhm.
Um, then what will happen is the system will evolve further, so you have more integrations, you'll have more customizations. The team might also have a turnaround time, right? Some people might leave, some people might join. Then you realize, the knowledge was actually in with some people, and now you're starting to a bit get, no, I wouldn't say nervous, but now you can see it doesn't feel right anymore, right? So, and it gradually came in. So there's no dramatic moment. It just one point in time you're like, hang on, this doesn't sound right. How do we do this better? Now, what I do find interesting, and then that's why I meant with the trajectories, on the second point, you don't see it like bam on that day. It will just generally build up. So it's very difficult to find that momentum to say, yes, it's working. It could be better. It's not the end of the world, but it might become to get that momentum and to actually prioritize the governance work around that. Otherwise, you'll have the same problem as what I mentioned before. Things get deprioritized. And like I mentioned, the organizations that we work with that proactively see this trajectory coming and say, this
Mhm.
is going to be really, really a problem, that's the ones that are now having a headwind or head start.
Yeah. Wonderful, sure. Wonderful, sure. And you're right. When it comes into manual testing, it's something that you can companies start with, and but they realize that just takes up too much time, right? Just too much time, too many hours, and a lot of projects that I've worked on, the client, they have business users that are doing the testing, and these business users, let's say, in a total of 100%, this is taking 30% of their actual responsibilities. So when when you're able to automate that and have some strategic approach to it that we help with customers, then you not just you save on hours and time, but also when it comes on to the opportunity cost you save on that. Because as you mentioned earlier, Kristen, if you are in a management and you have to move away from your day to day to do less menial stuff, then it's just always going to be a headache, but it does cost the company in some way, right? So
Yeah.
really great point. Okay, so going on to my next question, how do you describe clients in terms of the impact of manual regression testing on their business users, especially key finance and project SMEs?
Right, so you said headache, and it's not far off, but the word I normally hear is this is very exhausting. And keep
Yeah,
in mind, I do kind of sympathize with them because these people
yeah,
have a primary job, right? Their job is to
yeah,
run the business and not test software.
yeah.
But organizations without automation will always per default need to go back to the ones that know the processes the best,
Mhm.
to validate them. And again, that's not why they were hired for. That's also probably not their aspiration. So they're just exhausted and they're not liking it. And when I say not liking it, it is actually true. And it's over time, there's a bit of a sense of resentment. So they
Mhm.
know every update cycle, they will be pulled away again from the actual work. They know it's
Yeah,
important, but again, it's at the expense of what they like to do, what they were hired to do, and what they're good at
yeah,
doing.
yeah.
Uh, and because these updates don't happen that irregularly, they're quite regularly, the
Mhm.
the frustration level built up. So they're exhausted and they're resented. So which is a really bad place to be. Then we go into the clients and tell them, look, there's a new update coming. This feature is going to benefit you out of this and this reason.
Yeah,
And then normally like, oh yeah, hang on, we need to test this. Oh God, no, we're not doing this again,
no,
right?
not again, not again.
So you're like, that's not good. And what's also interesting though, because it's so exhausting for everybody. It's
Mm,
some organizations that I saw, which I thought was quite an interesting phenomenon, is they would schedule the updates. I mean, obviously you have to take them, but there's a window when you can take them. So they
mhm,
will schedule to take those depending on the availability of the SMEs, rather than figuring out
see.
when is the right time for the business to update that, which is
Yeah.
really an interesting sign because that's when you know that the tail is wagging the dog, and that's not good.
Mm,
That's definitely not a place you want to be. Because the platform's supposed to serve the business, right? And it shouldn't hold you hostage twice a year or monthly, depending on which product you have.
so true.
So normally when we see this pattern about what I just mentioned, we know that it's certainly overdue for organizations to
Hmm.
speak to us, to work through the governance, to stabilize it in one way or another.
Yeah. Super. Okay, so going on to our seventh question. So once automation is in place, right? They were reactive, they're doing manual testing, but now they're proactive. And automation is now in the conversation. It's been set up. How does it change the conversation between IT, finance, and business leadership around update management?
Well, the obvious one is obviously the conversation stops being reactive. So, yep, we
Yeah.
did something right. And it starts being a bit more structured. Because again, keep in mind, before automation, every update would trigger a negotiation. Who's
Hmm.
available? Who can realistically test this? What are we willing to accept as a risk? And it's improvised every single time, right? Now, after automation, it becomes much more fact-based. You can say, here's what we tested, here's what passed, and here's what still needs attention before we do a go live.
Hmm.
So, in a sense, you become very evidence-based, which is also for a lot of our clients really good from a SOC compliance stuff perspective. So it's not about opinions anymore. It's about hard evidence-based facts. This is what's been done. This is what's passed. This is what's not passed. And that changes the dynamic quite drastically or
Yeah.
significantly because everybody is working from the same factual standpoint rather than from different levels of, I put this, confidence and anxiety because
Hmm.
it's all now really down to what's on paper. And the deeper change is trust, which is something we really do need in our businesses, because leaders start to feel that the platform is being managed strongly. Now, with a feeling of a platform is managed strongly, governed strongly, there's a clear ownership, clear processes, clear evidence, it
Hmm.
will enable organizations to be more confident in applying new features that will help them um, further down the road, which is
Yeah.
basically the value of D365, that to evolve with the updates. So that's definitely a change that comes when you start introducing automated testing. Um, and it also opens the door to a broader conversation about the platform in general. So not just the
Hmm.
features, but what else can we do with our platforms? What else can we leverage? Where else in the business can we use this? Which is ultimately also the value of D365, right? That expanding end-to-end integrations all around the world. Um, so that's probably the biggest shift. So I would say reactive then to very structured evidence, confidence based.
Hmm. It's good change, right? It's
It's
positive
good.
change, and
It's uh
especially
it's fun. It's fun to see it.
yeah.
It's very painful to get there, but it's very fun to see it when your clients are at that level that you're like, oh yes, this worked out well.
That's so true. All right, so we go into the last question actually of this
Oh,
Q&A.
wow.
Uh, so what one piece of advice do your most mature customers always give to others who are just beginning their test automation journey?
Right. I think I'm sure it's start before you're ready. I think that's been the
Yeah.
theme throughout your questions towards me, right?
Hmm.
I think if you're waiting for the perfect outcome, like you prepare a lot, you'll still be waiting till now because there's never going to be the perfect strategy. There's never going to be the perfect team that can do both day-to-day and testing or hybrid or it's all going to be work in progress. It is a reality. So the best advice is start early, figure out two, three most critical processes that the team knows absolutely everything inside out. Get that on paper, get the acceptance testings on or the thresholds on paper, and then execute on that process. And
Yeah,
then the next update, you can include another process into your sort of bucket list, if you will, right? And then the
yeah,
next one, you do another one and another one. And then ultimately, you'll start building that inventory. So the best advice is don't wait until everything, all the stars align. That's going to be very challenging to be in that space. Start with the critical processes, I would say, and then take it from there. And I think when you think about yours and my partnership as companies, this is exactly where we can help, right? We can help with identifying the governance and the processes, then transfer them to the for the automation. That's when you come in, right, to see how the X Plus helps, and then slowly but surely build something up. I think that's my number one piece of advice that I would give.
yeah. That's a solid advice. And the good thing about, what we do in working with customers and partners, just saving a lot of time because, time is money. Time is the current currency. It's the currency, right? And even for our partners, when you're able to, go very confidently to your customer on a project and say, this is how we can help solve these issues, right? Being their trusted advisor, you have the relationship, and with what we provide, and not just in the sense of the application, because our team, we also have a good number of experts on our team when it comes down to Dynamics 365 years of experience. So you're getting the expertise plus the application, and this is something we provide both partners and customers, right? Because we care about your project, we care about you, and then at the end of the day, we just want to help solve these issues, right? So that business can be successful and that everyone can be happy in business, right? Of course, you can never be planned for everything, but it's better to have something in place so that there is some framework to say this is what we did and this is how we mitigate those issues, right?
Agree?
Super. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead to share just like a quick demo. So in terms of what we just discussed about the questions I asked Christian and the responses and our answer to the market as it relates to these pain points when it comes on to manual testing, we at X Plus developed an application that will solve many of those challenges. And also, we try to make it user friendly because we do understand that in some cases, or probably most, the business users are doing the testing, so they're non-technical, right? But also even for developers, right? They don't want anything too complex that requires coding because you just adding more layer of work to what you already have to handle. And that's what kind of sets us apart from what is already out there in the market. So I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. All right, so what you are seeing, this is all our application. So this is our test automation application. And the beauty of it is just the user interface. It's very user friendly. So if you have business users, they're non-technical, within 24 hours, they can easily learn how to use the application. And we have, we always provide train and support. But just to give a brief rundown and what's going to happen. So in this instance, all you have to do is you just connect your environment, right? So you connect your D365 environment, whether that is CE, whether it's F&O as well. We've recently launched in the Business Central market as well. Or it could be any web applications. So it also stretches beyond that. And then you set up a virtual users. Now, here's a great thing about virtual users because if you're in an organization, you have 200 users or more, it's going to take a lot of time if you have to depend on those users to do the test that is required, right? So the virtual users that we have here, they mimic real users, right? So they have their login, they're authenticated through the Microsoft login that logs into your Dynamics environment. And then just as what a real user would do, for example, doing a purchase order, the virtual user replicates that. So when it comes on to testing at scale, you don't have to worry about putting in a lot of manual hours relying on let's say business users to perform these tests for you, because you're able to set this up from the get-go, and then you can just scale it across the board. Um, and then when it comes on to organization, as we mentioned, right, having some strategy, some organization. So we have projects where you can now decide, we create the testing strategy and say, these are the projects that we're working on, whatever the modules are, project and operation, supply chain, and then you create the project plan, and then within that project, you have the what we call scripts. So the scripts are basically a snapshot of your usual business process. So what you would do regularly to create a purchase order, logging into Dynamics, going to the module, and those step-by-step processes. With our application, we can capture that. It records that, and then it becomes a script. And then you can now, let's say you need to test this for 100 users or more, with the virtual users that is connected to this project, you're able to do it at scale. So I'm going to show you an example. So I'm going to play this, and you're going to see it in real time. So as you can see, and it's if you're familiar with RSAT as well, it's also kind of similar to RSAT. The key difference is we can pause, we can go back, we can make changes to previous steps. So that makes it a lot more different in terms of what you are used to in RSAT. But let's hit play here, and there you go. So as you can see, it logs you into the environment, and this is the virtual user doing this. Literally what a real user would be doing in terms of logging into the environment, going to the accounts and payable section, and doing the usual step-by-step process when it comes on to doing purchasing order. Um, you can also, as I mentioned, you can stop in the middle if you want to make some changes. You can go back, make some changes there. You can edit, and then you can just continue right away. So that's where I mentioned that makes it, different for RSAT. So, so in this sense, it's just taking the business process that you would do on a usual day-to-day, and then it captures that, and then now you have a strategy in place, you have it recorded, and then now you have your standard operation procedure. The great thing about this as well is that you can add an Excel file. So let's say if you need to do a test and you need to use a logic function, or you need to connect your Excel file as well, you're able to do it. And then this also can do loop. So if they need the test to be done in a specific loop where it needs to go back to step 3 or 4, then go to step 7, then needs to go back to 3 or 4, it is able to do that. So that's a lot of, as you can see, that's a lot of time that you're already saving, if you had to do this, manually, or rely on a business user to do this. So in terms of what we're trying to work with customers and partners is, we want to bring simplicity, because we know that business processes, it can become complex, and there are other parts of the organization that needs to be managed. And what we're trying to do is, we're trying to take away the complexity when it comes on to testing, and provide a more, let's say, tailored approach that is more easier to use, not just for the developers, but also even the business user. So the UI is very intuitive, it's very user friendly, and this is something that you can take right now and you can create your SOP. It's well documented, and if you're going to hire someone new, that let's say you need to get a new person that's going to come on board to do some of the tests, then you already have some training document that is in place. So as you can see, it's just really amazing in terms of what it's doing. Kristen, do you want to add any comment? Because you have also, when you signed you as a partner, you had the exposure of seeing how our application works in real time and even working with your customer on the project.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I can echo what you're saying.
Yeah,
So my experience, so my team's experience was
yeah,
once they sat down with our clients, we went through all the test cases. So normally, typically, they were, in systems like an ADO or Jira and all these fun stuff, where they had the test cases, the expected results, and then my team was able to fairly quickly go through them, create them in EA.
hmm
Obviously, I must admit my team is technical and functional, but nevertheless, they
yeah,
did say it's a very intuitive platform. They stood it up fairly quickly. So my experience with when we look at our partnership, it's quite good because we were able to set up the test cases in your
yeah,
platform extremely quickly. So with that, we were able to also showcase the value very quickly as well, right? So what I meant, like
hmm
slowly building the inventory up, because platform is easy to use and it shows
yeah,
value fairly quickly.
yeah. As you can see, it's really really intuitive, and what that's one of the things that our customers say. It's just so easy to use. So this has been done in the foreground that you're seeing, but there's also the opportunity to do it in the background as well. So if I go back, and then there is the option to play in the background. So and then you can create documentation, as I mentioned, right? So you can have a video documentation, you can have documentation and video, and then you just have basically a screenshot of the different steps that were taken, and then you can just, you can display it in the background. So you've seen it on the foreground. You can also do it in the background. You can go into the history to check, what's the status in terms of what was tested. And also we have the integration with Azure DevOps. So you can actually migrate these test cases over to Azure DevOps if you have, let's say, pipelines in Azure DevOps, or a test plan already in Azure DevOps. You can migrate it over there in that sense. And as it relates to I mentioned about the documentation, right? So yeah, so it's still doing the test, but another thing that I also want to mention here is you are able to change the status. So let's say, for example, if you're already doing your test plan in Azure DevOps and you want the status to be, you know, changed to when it's published, then you can have a strategy that if the status is published, then that's when you start doing the testing. And then also, if you're going to do it in batches, which is a possibility that we provide, you can just say ready for test or ready for review. If there needs to be someone from the team that needs to go ahead and review this, right? In the sense of that. And there's also the option to do scheduler tests. So when it comes on to what we talk about regression testing, and you need to do this at scale, we're able to, have this organized in the sense of that. So it's really, as I mentioned, it's just providing for companies the opportunity to have some strategy, but also when it comes on to having the user interface that even business users will be able to understand. They'll be able to go in and within 24 hours or more, we can actually train them, and they're able to go ahead and just start doing the testing. So this is what we have provided to the market, and we've been really really successful in working with customers directly and with partners. And if anyone on this session today would definitely want to reach out and have a full-on demo to see how it works, we'd be more than happy to have that arranged as well. But The user interface, very, very clean, very intuitive, and you just feel that there's some organization in how now you're moving from reactive, now we're bringing you to a proactive state. All right. So that concludes it for this demo today. But maybe do we have anything in the chat section? If there's any questions, we could maybe Kristen can take a stab at it.
Let's have a look.
Hmm.
I don't see any. We might have, probably we were just very, very clear.
Yeah,
So,
that's good. You were very clear. All right. So, in terms of if there won't be any questions, of course, we will send this recorded session to all the registrants, so you'll be able to have access to it and you can watch it. And then, of course, you can feel free to have a conversation. What we want to do is we just want to help your business uh, in terms of we do understand in business it can be very complex. There's so many different key moving parts, and especially operating on an enterprise scale. And when it comes on to testing, it's always going to be there, cannot be ignored. The updates are coming very fast. So why not plan ahead of it, right? Why not get ahead of it so that it no longer becomes a problem? And that's what we are trying to do, what we're trying to bring to the market to just help customers be more at ease and have some strategy in how they go about in testing. Kristen, any closing remarks from your side?
no, I think th this was fun. I think from closing remarks, because we obviously focused a lot about testing, I think it's worth mentioning this whole journey starts with the release notes interpretation. That's something that we typically forget that needs to start somewhere. So
Yeah.
I think my only advice is find a partner that truly knows your business that can help you with the release notes to really show you this is coming, this is going to impact you, this is not going to impact you. I'm actually quite proud. My team has now an offer for that too on the marketplace because from there we can derive basically back to the X Plus relationship. If we know what's coming, because our team can identify this pretty well, then we can help figuring out what actually needs to be tested, and then we can bring the layer in with the really cool tool that you guys have to automate it. But yeah, I think for my closing remarks would always be start at the beginning, think about what's coming, the release notes,
Yeah.
and start before everything is perfect. I think that's what I can give you.
Super, super. All right. So thank you everyone for joining today. We do hope it was productive and that it was also engaging. As I mentioned, we will send the call recording, but feel free to reach out. Let's have the conversation. Let's go and get at it. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Kristen,
Thank you,
for
Antonio, for having
doing
me.
the session with us.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.